Welcome to Bite-Sized L&D, your quick, no-nonsense update on the latest in workplace learning. Today, we're diving into the controversial rollback of DEI initiatives in corporations and uncovering why some companies are prioritizing financial success over genuine values. All right, let's get straight into it.
Welcome to Bite-Sized L&D. I'm Donna, and today I'm joined by Yakov Lasker, a senior development manager with 15 years of leadership experience across multiple companies. Yakov, I've been dying to talk to you about something that's been bothering me for months.
The DEI rollbacks?
How did you...
Because it's bothering everyone who's paying attention. But here's what gets me. It's not that companies are changing their minds. It's the speed and the shamelessness.
Okay, so for listeners who maybe haven't been tracking this closely, what are we talking about? Give me the scale of this.
In 2020, after George Floyd's murder, corporations fell over themselves making commitments, pledges, programs, chief diversity officers at $300,000 salaries, whole departments. Fast forward to 2025, Trump takes office in January, and by February, companies are literally deleting decades of diversity documentation from their websites. Wells Fargo erased their entire archive.
Wait, their entire archive? That's not pivoting, that's erasing history.
Exactly. And here's the number that haunts me. Only 19% of companies actually cut DEI funding. Most are just being quiet about it. They call it diversity hushing.
So they're still doing the work, but...
They're ashamed to admit it, which tells you everything about whether this was ever about principle or just about reading the room.
Okay, but hold on. Devil's advocate for a second. Trump issued executive orders. There's legal uncertainty. The Supreme Court struck down affirmative action in 2023. Maybe companies are just being cautious?
Sure, except Apple and Costco face the exact same shareholder proposals to eliminate DEI. You know how their investors voted?
I'm guessing they kept it?
97% and 98% voted against eliminating DEI. The investors, the people supposedly demanding this, overwhelmingly supported keeping the programs.
So companies rolled back DEI that their own investors wanted them to keep?
They weren't responding to pressure, they were anticipating pressure. And that's what makes this different.
This is where it gets interesting to me, because I've been thinking about this as an American problem. Like, we take every good idea and turn it into a certification industrial complex. Was DEI always doomed because of how we do things?
You're onto something. Look, I'm actually skeptical about DEI as it was implemented. The workshops, the consultants, the mandatory training modules. A lot of it was bureaucratic theater. When you professionalize something moral into a business function with KPIs and metrics, you've already lost the plot.
Because then it's just another line item that can be cut.
Precisely. But here's what bothers me. I've seen this from an outside perspective, having grown up in Russia, worked in Israel, watched American business culture. Americans seem to take idealism, convert it into a money-making machine, then abandon it the moment the ROI calculation changes.
That's brutal, but is it true?
Look at the timeline. The same CEOs who gave passionate speeches about racial justice in 2020 are now sending memos about evolving our approach in 2025. No explanation of what changed in their thinking, only what changed in the political environment.
So you're saying they never believed it in the first place?
I'm saying they believed in doing what successful companies do. In 2020, that meant DEI commitments. In 2025, it means quiet rollbacks. The substrate never changed, only the surface behavior.
Okay, this is where I want to push back a bit. Because I know people in corporate leadership, and they're not all hollow sociopaths. There are real constraints: fiduciary duty to shareholders, legal risks, competitive pressures. Maybe we're being too harsh?
No, you're right. It's not moral emptiness exactly, it's something more systemic. American corporate law creates this trap where executives have a legal obligation to maximize shareholder value. When DEI was good for recruitment and brand value, it was the right business decision. When it became a liability, abandoning it became the right business decision.
So the same calculus, just different inputs?
Yes, and here's what's dark about that. The values never entered the equation as independent variables. They were always instrumental, always just means to the end of financial performance.
Oh God, that's depressing, because it means even human dignity gets reduced to an ROI calculation.
Now you're getting it. This isn't about DEI specifically, it's about what happens when financial success becomes the only metric that matters. Everything else, fairness, culture, even basic principles, becomes negotiable.
But this wasn't always the case, was it? I mean, maybe I'm being nostalgic, but I feel like 20, 30 years ago, American companies at least pretended to have values beyond the bottom line.
Maybe. Or maybe what's changed is the collapse of the pretense. In the 1990s, if a company wanted to pivot away from some social commitment, they'd find a way to do it quietly, to avoid looking cynical. Now they just announce it in memos and move on.
The shame is gone.
The shame is gone. And I think that's what makes this moment different. It's not the hypocrisy. Corporations have always been hypocritical. It's the shamelessness of the hypocrisy.
Okay, but let's bring this back to something practical, because our listeners are L&D professionals, managers, people trying to build teams and cultures. What does this teach us?
Here's what I've learned over 15 years in leadership. There's a difference between tactical compromises and red lines. Sometimes you make hard choices because of business constraints. That's reality. But if you can't articulate a principle that remains consistent across changing conditions, you don't actually have values. You just have responses to stimuli.
Can you give me an example of what that looks like in practice?
Sure, let's say you've spent 5 years building a fearless culture where people can admit mistakes without fear of punishment. Then something goes wrong, and there's pressure to make an example of someone. If you fire that person, you haven't just made a tough call. You've negated everything you built. You've told your team that the culture was conditional.
And you can't come back from that.
You can't. Culture is built over years and destroyed in moments. These American CEOs seem to think they can pivot 180 degrees on fundamental values and just update the website, change some job titles, and move on. As if culture is just PowerPoint slides.
So when you're in that position, when you're facing pressure to do something that contradicts your principles, how do you know where the line is?
Ask yourself, can I explain this decision to myself in a way that's coherent with what I've taught my team? Not, can I justify it, or can I rationalize it, but can I explain it without contradicting everything I've said before?
And if you can't?
Then you've found your red line. And here's the thing. Sometimes finding that line costs you something, but at least you remain a coherent person. You don't become whatever the wind is blowing.
This is making me think about something broader, though. You mentioned growing up in Russia, working in Israel. Do you think this is uniquely American? This financial success above all mentality?
I think America has taken it further than most places. I used to think Europeans were lazy. 35-hour work weeks, taking August off. But as I get older, I realize they've just answered the question, what is life for? Differently. If life is for building wealth and status, European culture looks inefficient. But if life is for actually living, for relationships, for culture, for experiencing your existence, it makes perfect sense.
So the laziness critique only works if you've already bought into the American premise about what matters.
Exactly, and here's what's tragic. Many Americans don't discover that financial success doesn't create happiness until after they've spent decades chasing it. By then, they've built a life around it. The house payments, the children's expectations, an identity tied to professional success. Walking away becomes almost impossible.
So we're trapped by our own success.
Some of us are. And the corporate DEI rollback is just one symptom of this larger disease, the inability to value anything that can't be converted into quarterly earnings.
Okay, so I want to end on something actionable, because this has been heavy. What can L&D professionals, managers, people building teams, what can they actually do with this information?
First, recognize that whatever values you claim for your organization will be tested. The test won't come from employee surveys or vision statements. It'll come when those values cost you something: money, political capital, convenience. That's when you'll discover if they're real.
So test yourself before the world tests you?
Yes. Write down what you actually believe about how to treat people, about what kind of culture you're building. Make it specific. Then ask, if following this principle cost me my bonus, or my promotion, or even my job, would I still do it? If the answer is no, you don't actually believe it. You just like it when it's convenient.
That's harsh but fair.
And here's the second thing. Be very suspicious of values that come with certification programs, consulting fees, and mandatory training modules. When something moral gets professionalized into an industry, it usually means the substance is being drained out.
So focus on the substance, not the performance.
Right. Don't ask how can we demonstrate our commitment to diversity. Ask, are we actually giving people from different backgrounds real opportunities, real authority, real stakes in success? The first question leads to photo ops and statements. The second leads to actual change.
And maybe that change happens quietly, without the press releases?
Often, the best change does. The companies that are actually doing this work well in 2025, they're not shouting about it. They're just doing it because it makes their teams stronger and their businesses better. No fanfare, no fear.
So next time your leadership asks you to roll out the latest corporate values initiative, remember? Culture isn't built through announcements. It's built through the choices you make when no one's watching, when it costs you something, when the wind changes direction and you have to decide, do I bend or do I hold the line?
That's when you find out who you actually are.
Yakov Lasker, this has been both depressing and clarifying, which is exactly what I needed. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Donna. Important conversation.
That's it for this episode of Bite-Sized L&D. If this made you uncomfortable, good, sit with it. We'll be back next week with something equally thought-provoking. Until then, keep building things that matter.
We've explored how the rollback of DEI initiatives highlights companies' prioritization of financial success over genuine values and emphasize the importance for leaders to uphold true values beyond performative gestures. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends and colleagues so they can also stay updated on the latest news and gain powerful insights. Stay tuned for more updates.